in 2013, Man of Steel came out, and I will review it. I will review it. I will review it! Welcome to another Small Damn Productions review. Now, before you ask why I skipped over Superman 3, 4, and Superman Returns, I didn't really have time to do them within the rest of this month, and I think Man of Steel is the one I can contribute the most to, because really the most I can say with the other ones is laugh at them, really. So that's why I've chosen to go straight on to Man of Steel, just so you know. Anyway, time for a history lesson! As you've heard in my previous reviews, or if you've just done a little research yourself, the first two Superman movies were major box office and commercial successes. However, in 1983, Superman 3 came out, and it was all downhill from there for this franchise. As if Superman 3 hadn't cemented the death of the franchise enough, in 1986, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, came out. A movie which, quality-wise, is just about as good as The Warrior of the Lost World. But corrupt studio executives weren't done yet. 20 years after Superman 4 came out, Superman Returns also came out. The movie received generally favorable reviews from critics, but most fans hated it. I haven't seen Superman Returns, so I can't really give my thoughts on it, but as for Superman 4, I think that it belongs in here. Not my sister's bedroom, the bathroom. Now, DC versus Marvel is currently one of the biggest disputes in comic book history, but it's been going on for a long time. It started with DC on top, producing such monster hits as Batman, Superman the movie. Meanwhile, Marvel's biggest hit was the live-action Incredible Hulk show. But then, in 2002, Marvel finally pulled themselves together and released Spider-Man. And yes, I do own this on VHS. The movie was colorful, corny, and fun for all ages. And it was a real relief seeing a movie like this again. Because after the 90s, a decade of superhero movies being terrible, people just didn't take them seriously anymore. And this movie doesn't really take Spider-Man seriously at all, but it still tackles some pretty heavy themes, which I think kind of works to the detriment of the movie sometimes, because you've got these really comedic scenes in one part, but then these really deep scenes in another. But I think for what it is, it does a fairly good job of meshing them together. The best thing about the movie is also the worst thing. It created the blueprint for the modern superhero blockbuster. Now, don't get me wrong, I love most of the superhero movies that have been coming out recently, but they're everywhere. But though there have been many series that have been made about superheroes, no superhero series today is more successful than Marvel's cinematic universe. Almost every one of these movies pulls in big money at the box office and is a hit with critics and fans alike. Marvel Cinematic Universe is responsible for bringing many heroes that are now icons to the big screen who were once pretty obscure. Black Panther and Iron Man, people had heard of them before the movies came out, but the movies are what really catapulted them to stardom. But probably the most iconic film in Marvel's entire catalog is The Avengers, released in 2012. This movie was basically every nerd's greatest fantasy in reality, as it featured Marvel's most iconic superheroes getting together to fight against the enemy. The movie was making hundreds of millions, critics loved it, fans loved it, everybody responded positively to this movie, except for a few people, but they're not relevant now. But anyway, with the massive success of that movie, few people could help but ask, where's DC in all of this? After all, the Justice League was created before the Avengers were, so technically, Marvel ripped off DC. Yet, DC is just standing back there and letting Marvel take over with their own cinematic universe. What are they going to do about this? The answer came when in 2013, Man of Steel was released. Their answer was, we're not going to try at all. Zack Snider was brought in to direct. Henry Cavill was cast as Superman, and Amy Adams was cast as Lois Lane. I think the casting of Amy Adams as Lois Lane was a pretty good choice, but I think it's weird that this British guy is playing Superman, an American icon. The movie also hired several writers from the critically acclaimed Dark Knight trilogy, which was probably one of the major selling points of this movie, besides it just being a Superman movie that was new. This movie is sort of a remake of Superman 2 more than the original. Lex Luthor's nowhere to be found. He wouldn't show up until the next movie, and even in that movie, that is not the Lex Luthor I knew. And Zod in this movie isn't the Zod I used to know either. The movie starts out on Krypton for 25 minutes. So, as in the first movie, Jor-El is trying to convince the Council of Krypton that Krypton is going to get destroyed. And as in the first movie, he is unsuccessful. But then something a little bit different happens. Zod crashes his party. In the 1978 film, we just see Jor-El and the pre-Kryptonians, Zod, Ursa, and Non. Ursa and Non do not make an appearance in this movie directly, but we saw them, and we just saw them getting put in the Phantom Zone. But this movie, there's a full-on fight scene between Jor-El and Zod. In this movie, Zod and Jor-El both agree that Krypton is doomed to die, but they disagree on how they're going to get the people to escape it. Jor-El goes down to this really cool-looking underwater chamber thing located somewhere on Krypton and steals the Kodiak, which is something that contains the memories of Krypton or something. It's complicated, you see. He then proceeds to use the Kodiak to power the ship, which carries his son, Kal, better known as Superman, to Earth. Zod, who wanted to use the Kodiak for his own plan of escaping Krypton, is furious at Jor-El for using it and murders him on the spot. But the ship containing Kal is already well on its way towards Earth. Zod and his gang are imprisoned in the Phantom Zone, which is carried on a spaceship, which leads to an interesting scene. I will find him! Krypton goes kaboomy, and everyone dies, leaving only Kal and Zod's gang as the last survivors of Krypton. You probably know what happens next. Superman is raised by the Kents when he lands on Earth. As he grows up, he begins to find himself possessed of amazing powers, and life goes on for him. This part is told through flashbacks, but don't worry, it's not very hard to understand. We then see Superman at various stages of his life, learning how to fly, starting up his whole thing with Clark Kent, learning to control his powers, and learning about his Kryptonian origin. But then, one night, a mysterious transmission from none other than Zod himself, mysteriously freed from the Phantom Zone, transmits to Earth, warning Superman that he has only 24 hours to stop him before he will destroy humanity to replace it with Krypton. You'll understand how that works if you watch the movie. Superman, being himself, decides that he will go to confront Zod. Now, after hearing that plot summary, you'll probably be very surprised to hear that this movie got very mixed reviews on its first release, and now too. The movie currently has a score of 55% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is still most critics giving it a positive rating, but whatever. Despite the somewhat negative press this film got from critics, it grossed over $236 million in America alone, making it the most successful Superman movie to date. What I'm about to say is going to offend some people and delight others. I was really expecting to like this movie because I did enjoy Batman v Superman. I was one of the only people who did, but, you know. But this movie just felt really lifeless to me. There's so many things about it that I hate. But overall, it's just a dull experience for me. Let's start off with the things I did like about it. Superman has some pretty cool moments. Even his introduction scene where he saves the oil machine thingy is pretty well done, with him trying desperately to hold it up, but because this version of Superman isn't quite as powerful as the comic book version, he actually struggles a little bit, and the thing ultimately blows up on him, but he saved all the people, and of course, Superman's not exactly killable with an explosion, so that doesn't make much of a difference. Though the first thing he does when he gets back to shore after that is he steals this person's shirt. Newsflash, Superman is not supposed to be a thief. The action scenes as a whole are brilliant, almost Dragon Ball Z-like. As much as I love the first two Superman movies, 70s and 80s special effects could never capture what 2013 special effects can do with these characters. Though for me personally, the final fight where Superman actually goes against Zod was actually my least favorite action scene in the whole movie, which is a serious problem because the fight between your main hero and your main villain should probably be pretty cool. I just found the fight boring. I'm sorry. The color palette was just really dull. The music was way too overpowering, and Zod's acting, I'll get onto that later. Remember how I said in my Superman 2 review that Superman is a little bit out of character in that movie? Well, this movie takes it up to 11. There are moments in this movie that will make the average Superman fan wince. But I understand that they're going for a much darker, more serious Superman than the Christopher Reeve version, or the one from the comics. And not just that, but a younger, more inexperienced Superman as well. So I think I can let this one slide. Let me think of some other things I like about the movie. The cinematography is a mixed bag. Some scenes are really well shot and have a dreamlike sort of atmosphere, but the color palette is so dull at times that it really isn't very exciting for me to look at, especially in the scenes in Krypton and the scenes in Metropolis. Other positives, that scene where Zod transmits his message and all the power goes out everywhere, that was a creepy scene. I think that's all the positives I have for this movie. Now on to the fun part, the things I didn't like about the movie. Zod's acting. Oh! I mean, seriously, this movie wants to be so serious, but they had the main villain be played by this guy. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Why would you ever cast like that? If you destroy this ship, you'll destroy Krypton. He sounds like a bad actor from a bad 80s B movie. I just said the word bad a lot. In fact, a lot of the dialogue is really corny, like something out of a Hallmark movie. I'm okay with the cheesy dialogue in the original films because those films, although serious at times, did have a comedic sort of side to them. Same thing can be said for the Spider-Man Raimi trilogy. But this movie insists that the viewer take it seriously, yet it has lines like, I will find him. The music is just another generic Hans Zimmerman score that could be switched out with any other, and it's very often really overpowering, which takes away from a lot of the scenes for me. Superman and Lois Lane's chemistry is near non-existent, and so many people die in the final battle at the hands of Superman and Zod fighting that it's almost impossible to count, but Now, I might have just gotten down on that movie quite a bit, but you know, I also gave a lot of positives for it, and that's for a good reason. Because there is a lot to like about this movie. I personally don't like it much myself, but I can totally see why a lot of Superman fans do. I find it kind of boring and uninspired, but if you like it, that's great. There were many scenes that I myself liked in it. I just didn't like the overall experience. This has been Signature, and until next time, I hope you enjoy this video. Wait a minute. Something's not right here. Nothing weird happened to me in this episode. I mean, the most I can say about 2, 3 through 6 is make fun of, 3 through 5. But corrupt studio executives haven't given up, and 20 years later, in the same year the Richard Donner cut of Superman was released, Superman 2